cyber threat landscape keeps changing. So you have to cut. So it can't just say, here's the top 10 things to do to protect yourself and assume that that's going to be a static, best practices going in the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. Those things are going to change. So once you're out of the workforce or away from an organization that's constantly trying to train you, then you're going to have less and less knowledge about how to protect yourself. So I think senior citizens are especially vulnerable to these types of threats.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to this episode of GNSI's video series. I'm Dr. Tad Schnaufer, the Strategy and Research Manager here at the Global and National Security Institute at the University of South Florida. Today, we're joined by Professor George Burruss. He is currently the chair of the Department of Criminology at USF, and he is also affiliated with Cyber Florida, the state's Center for Cybersecurity. He is also a senior faculty fellow with GNSI. Today, we're going to discuss his recently co-authored decision brief, Building Trust in Digital Response, the role of chatbots in cybercrime prevention. Welcome to the video series, George.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So let's talk about this excellent decision brief you co-authored with a number of authors that recently was published here with GNSI on cybercrime. So cybercrime has been growing rapidly, as you noted in the brief, with some of the losses up to $16 billion in 2024. So what are the main drivers behind this huge surge in cybercrime?
Right. Well, there's a couple main factors that are affecting it. One is, as everything becomes more integrated technologically, is we're networked into everything: banking, education, romance, Internet of Things. So all your appliances, everything becomes networked. So there's just more targets out there for victimization. So that's one element. So there's more things to fend against, and then also there's been a sort of a growth in sort of a democratization of malware and hacking tools that now you don't even have to have the skills to be a hacker. You can just hire a service to do it for you. Wow. And it's pretty easy to go online and find out how to do some basic things. And then, from there you can kind of build. So the probably 20 years ago, the pool of hackers was relatively small to an elite group of people that could really do some damage. That's exploded. So now you've got a lot more targets and a lot more motivated offenders. So you would expect to see an explosion of cybercrime. And another element too is, as it becomes more prevalent, that people also are starting to report it more because they know now they can go to the Internet Crime Complaint Center and file a complaint. So just the fact that there's a place to report it increases the reports as well. So all those things are contributing to the rise of cybercrime.
That's pretty interesting. And you noted you could hire these services. Isn't that like illegal? Wouldn't there be some sort of protections on that?
Well, I mean, these are a lot of places are a lot of services are on the dark web. So you can, if it doesn't take much to learn how to go on the dark web and find these hacker for hire services. And then depending on what you want to do, they can either write the malware for you, or they have just an interface, just like you'd buy any app. So you just download the app, plug in the numbers that you need, and then off you go, and they can do what you want it to do. And then it's relatively cheap to do. And then they can the hackers that make the malware can scale it up and make a lot of money that way.
Wow. I mean, so who are at risk here?
Well, everyone's at risk. I mean, depending on a couple things, the type of apps or programs that you use. So it depends on how secure your bank is. It depends on how secure the app is you're using. So those things have an effect on how vulnerable you are. But another thing is what we call the human factor in cybercrime, which is just everyone's awareness about things they can do to protect themselves. So one thing that companies try to do, or organizations, is to teach their people to be wary of, business email compromise, phishing attacks. So trying to get you to give away your credentials so they can log into the system. So you have to explain to people, first of all, what that is, and then how do you protect against it? And then if you increase the awareness, that should lower the risk, but it's never going to be zero. So in this day and age, cybercrime, everyone's at risk for cybercrime. So back in the 90s, two of my professors wrote a book about burglary and armed robbery. And they said, if we go to cashless society, things will be a lot safer. Burglaries will go down, robberies will go down, because there'll be a lot less money flowing out in the world. And that's true in that regard. So the street crimes are down, but then cybercrime is filled in the gap. So now I don't carry cash with me anymore. Everything's electronic. So now I'm much more vulnerable to losing money.
Is there, when you talk about education, is there some populations that probably aren't getting that? So if you're in the workforce, you might be getting, I imagine, education's in schools. I know Cyber Florida, for example,
Mhm.
is working on that, but what populations might be missing that?
So certainly retirees, once you're out of the workforce, then the type of information you get about protecting yourself, because the cyber threat landscape keeps changing. So you have to
Mhm.
cut. So it can't just say, here's the top 10 things to do to protect yourself and assume that that's going to be a static, best practices going the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. Those things are going to change. So once you're out of the workforce or away from an organization that's constantly trying to train you, then you're going to have less and less knowledge about how to protect yourself. So I think senior citizens are especially vulnerable to these types of threats.
Yeah, so let your grandparents know to keep
Right.
keep an eye out for those phishing emails. So, what are some of these maybe cyber crimes going to look like for the user? We have deep fakes, we have what you mentioned in the brief, these pig butchering scams, these social engineering scams. So, how
Mhm.
how can we see those, and what do those look like?
Well, so take the case of pig butchering, which is, so it's kind of an unfortunate name, but the idea is that you're fattening up the victim to then be butchered. So it's a slow con. So in some ways, it resembles just an old fashioned Ponzi scheme. So you
Mhm.
get someone to invest a little bit of money, you give them a return. They say, oh, so Bernie Madoff was a perfect example of a regular Ponzi scheme, right? So you invest in uh, you know, his financial scheme. You get a good return. You invest some more, and you keep investing, and then you bring in more people, and then the pot grows until the point where it collapses, and then usually the fraudster takes the money and runs.
Mm.
Madoff didn't, so he got caught with it. So pig butchering is that same idea: is that you get people to invest in something like cryptocurrency,
Mm.
and you give them a little bit of usually it starts out this way. So I'm sure you've gotten a text message that says, "Hey, let's meet up for dinner," and you're like, "Well, I don't know who this is. It's obviously a wrong number." And
Mhm.
you text back and say, "Hey, sorry, you got the wrong number." So that's the first hook they try to get into,
Mm.
and then they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was just about to celebrate. We got this big payoff on this investment, so I'm sorry to bother you. Won't trouble you again." And then most people say, "Okay, fine, whatever," and they won't think about it. But someone will say right back and say, "Well, how much did you make, or what? Tell me more
Mm.
about this." And they say, "Oh, look, it's not something you should invest in. We put in $1,000, we got a 20% return on." And they slowly just sort of build up how
Wow.
how this thing works, and then eventually the person will say, "Well, can I get in on it?" They'll say, "Well, how about give me $500?" And then they invest $500 in this cryptocurrency that probably doesn't exist. And then that you give them, $100 back over, say, 6 months. So they get $100 return. You're like, hey, that's pretty good. Now I'll invest 1,000. And it keeps going. And then finally they're fattening you up and then they run away. So the cyber aspect of it is using the idea of cryptocurrency and investment. That's the new thing. And then using the
Mhm.
text message, or what we call smishing attacks, to lure you in. So it's an old con, but it's just refaced with technology.
Wow, new technology makes it more accessible, and also with cybercurrency, most people don't have a good education in that. You don't know what cybercurrency
Right.
is. You don't know the background. You don't know if it's legit or not. So how do obviously you don't answer those
Right.
messages.
Right.
But are there some other protections, or just go to reputable sites? What's the how do you get around that?
Right. So you want to do if someone's interested in cryptocurrency, you'd want to do your background check on what ones are out there that actually are legitimate.
Mhm.
That are or I mean, the thing about cryptocurrency is the whole point of it is that it's decentralized.
Hmm.
There is no authority you can go to that says, "Tell me this thing is legitimate," and it's there's no danger in it, like we have FDIC for our banks. So
Mhm.
there's always going to be a risk in investing in cryptocurrency, but the payoffs are much higher. So it is enticing for people to invest in. So you just have to be careful with it. I mean, there's really no foolproof way of doing that.
Or it sounds like a lot of cyber crimes obviously just motivated by money. Is there
Mhm.
any other motivations, or is money the primary goal have you seen so far in your research?
Well, cybercrime is interesting for me as a criminologist, because one thing we study as criminologists is not just the legal aspect of a crime, but the motivations
Mhm.
that people get involved in it. So with cybercrime, a lot of times there's the financial motivation, of course, but a lot of it, if you go back a little bit, it's people get into it because they're interested in hacking, which hacking isn't in itself a crime, although we tend to think of hackers as criminals. But hacking is just taking something that exists, tinkering with it, find out its flaws, uh, working with it to make it better, or let people know there's something wrong with it. So it's kind of pulling things apart. It's like sort of more thinking like an engineer. So when I think of hackers, I just think of someone with that mindset. They're just interested in how things work and how they can work with them. Malicious hackers, on the other hand, have a motivation to cause harm through their hacking. So it could be they're interested. Their motivation might be to make money. It may be to just simply cause chaos, right? So
Mhm.
so someone who might um, harass somebody online, just for the fun of it. It could be someone might engage in denial of service attacks because they feel, let's say they're a gamer and they want to attack other gamers. They will launch a denial of service attack to wipe out another server, simply because they're interested in the gaming aspect of it. So there's a lot of motivations. Financial is one of them. But again, I think it's just sort of the hacking mindset is there's something out there. Let's see if we can break it apart and see what makes it work.
That's pretty interesting. And that's aspect of the motivations kind of being widespread, because we also see a number of different actors as well. You kind of have hybrid actors between just an individual or sometimes state sponsored, cybercrime, which kind of bleeds into cyber attacks.
Right. So as cybercrime has grown, also the advantages that malicious hacking and cybercrime gives to state actors is also expanded as well. So now you can have, let's say, a malicious hacker in some country that's let's say Russia's the state actor that wants to find somebody that can hack in the United States infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
So you could train your own cadre of hackers, and I'm sure they do. But then you could also find malicious hackers who are out there just on their own, kind of lone wolves. Hire them because they have a reputation, and then just see what they can do. And they can make money off it, but then they could also work for the state actor and give them information. So now you've got this network of people that aren't motivated necessarily by political motivations. It's just, again, they're out there hacking, and then someone else is interested in what they're doing, and it can help them. So they'll plug into it.
Right, and that offers the country, if they're trying to do malicious acts, a kind of an air of deniability.
Sure, absolutely,
because they're not officially with the government or anything like that.
Right. So I think that's one of the biggest problems. Probably the intelligence services is trying to use attribution to figure out, if there was let's say, denial of service attack on a government infrastructure, let's say their computer network,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you want to find out, well, who did this? Was this a state actor? Is this some prelude to some bigger offense, cyber-wise? And if it's a hybrid actor, you may find the person who did it, but then to find the tether back to the state sponsor may be very difficult. So the problem then is you can't just go off and say, well, I know this person's doing it for country X without knowing exactly what happened. And that makes it very difficult to say this was a state sponsored attack. So the fact that there's hybrid actors out there makes it very difficult to figure out, who's doing what for what purpose.
This really changes the aspect of a cyber crime to a cyber attack where you're hitting infrastructure or things like that. So what would that possibly look like? Were you kind of running the line between crime and a national security issue?
Well, again, it comes, the motivations may be, multifaceted. So someone could be doing it because they're making a profit off of doing it, so they could steal information and sell it. They could be doing a ransomware attack, but by doing the ransomware attack, they find the vulnerabilities into the infrastructure, sell that vulnerability to the state actor.
Wow.
So again, it's the motivations are hard to pin down. And so from a social science perspective, that's interesting. From a legal perspective, it's a nightmare because now you have to prove that somebody did it. And that proof is very difficult. So my first career was a white collar crime investigator for the state attorney's office and on consumer fraud. So prosecuting those cases were difficult because you had to show, one, there was harm to the victim. Two, that the person that caused the harm intended to do so. So a lot of times fraudsters would say, look, it was just a business deal that went bad. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to harm the person. You can't get me criminally on it. Sure, you could sue me civilly, but you can't prove that I was out to, maliciously harm somebody. So the same thing might be with the state actors is, this person was in our employment. We can't control what they did. That's they're doing that on their own. So how do you prove that was the case unless, the person in the middle, the hybrid hacker actually says, yes, I was hired by country X. Here's the payment they gave me. You'd have to work that all the way back up to whoever handled them.
Yes, it's the legal issue of establishing intent.
Right.
And then what does harm actually mean? Is stealing money, is that harmful?
Right.
Is that enough?
Yeah. Well, that, and then also legal jurisdiction. Like, if it's somebody, let's say China's the state actor that you're concerned about, but the hacker's in Turkey, well, who has jurisdiction to go after who's in charge of figuring out who you're going to prosecute, where are you going to prosecute them, what country?
Right, because that creates a whole nother layer of issues. Because it's one thing to get a pickpocket in a town and report it to the police, but how do you enforce criminal cyber laws when you have an international field playing into that? Right.
So there's efforts by the United Nations and Interpol, to try to make joint task force to operate against known actors. So there's some efforts to do that, but it's still very difficult legally.
So let's talk about your solution then. Not one of your proposed tools to be able to fight back on this, which is chatbots.
Yep.
Excuse me. So what does that look like? How does a chatbot possibly combat cybercrime?
Yeah. So I was as ChatGPT and the large language model started to come out. I was, and one aspect that was clear early on is these things can be used by malicious hackers, especially like phishing attacks. So it used to be you could spot a phishing attack, and phishing is a fake email from somebody that purports to be someone you know or an organization you trust to try to get information out of you. Right. So let's say you get an email from UPS saying your shipment is delayed. Click here to find out more, and you enter your information. So that's a phishing attack. So those were easy to spot because there was misspellings. It wasn't put together very well. Well, now that we have AI, hackers can, even if English is not their first language, can go to ChatGPT or any AI model and say, write me an email to this person. Here's the information I found out about them. Here's where they work. So it can make the email look very legitimate with not a lot of effort. So I thought, okay, if AI is being used for that purpose, can we kind of reverse engineer it and make AI work for us? So one thought was, if we can get people to protect themselves, one thing you want to do is make them aware. So one thing is, we do like public service announcements, something like this, where you tell people the dangers and hope that they'll protect themselves. But you have to get the information to them. So someone could go online and just Google, how do I protect myself online? But then they have to make the effort to do that. So nice thing about chatbots and large language models is because it's conversational, you can pull information out of it in a way that's easy to digest as opposed to just a large block of information that's you have to read through and digest. Sure. So my thought was, take a chatbot that we train so we know exactly what it's going to tell people, hang it on something like an state attorney general's website or the Better Business Bureau or Consumer Affairs. If somebody thinks they've been a victim, they can go to the chatbot and say, here's what happened to me. What do you think this is? And then based on how we've trained it, it'll say, okay, it'll look it up and say, this looks to be like a romance scam. Here's the things to look out for. And then it could ask more information like, did you give them money? And if they say yes, well, here's the things you need to do to protect yourself, like, change your passwords, contact your bank immediately, contact your credit card company. So it'll walk them through the steps to get them, to protect themselves. And in addition to that, we don't want it to get a lot of information from the victims, but we want the victims to say, basically, I'm in this zip code, I'm over 65 years old, I'm a, Hispanic female, just so we have some demographic information. That's it, not their address or social security number or anything. And then that way we could use the chatbot then to also inform law enforcement and say, look, in your jurisdiction, the number of romance scams seems to be climbing by let's say 20%. That's something you may want to be looking into. So we could almost use that as a reporting tool as well. So it informs people about what happened. It gives them tips about how to protect themselves. It tells them, it can even look up, contact your local law enforcement and then report back to law enforcement. So it can do all those things, in a pretty short amount of time. And the nice thing about it is it's scalable. So once this thing is out there, then people from all over can access it.
So with the chatbot, would you be able to, let's say I get an email suspicious, I could just input it there as like, is this a real email or not? And it would be able to decipher like, well, it's not a .com, it's something different, or the name doesn't seem right. It would be able to tell you, some clues.
Yeah, exactly. So we can put in the capabilities of just like you can now with ChatGPT is you can take a screenshot, put it into the chat. It can look it over. It can read it. It can read what the text says. It can look for, and then we have to train it. We have to train it to do this, but there's plenty of information out there that we can do that. So it'll look for header information. It'll look for common language, and some chatbots can detect AI language. So it could say, look, this looks like this was generated by AI. So it wouldn't be definitive and say, yes, this is absolutely a scam, but it could say, there's enough warning signs in this email that you should protect yourself.
Right. Well, it gives a resource to people, which you might not have. Like I said, if you're a retired citizen, where else do you go? You can't go to your employer. You don't have, so it's just an outlet. I mean, you had also mentioned, large language models, LLMs, and there's, in the decision brief, you noted between, open source and proprietary. So what's the difference between the two and how would those play into this chatbot, solution?
Right. So closed source AI is something like ChatGPT, where you have to pay a monthly fee to get it. So it's closed in the sense that they've programmed it, they've trained it. They don't always tell you how they've trained it or what goes into it. You don't know what they're doing in terms of quality control or security. It's all on their end, right? All that's done sort of behind the scenes. So that the benefit of a closed source is they take care of all those issues for you, right? So you're paying the fee for not just the chatbot, but everything else that goes on top of it. So privacy, protections, cybersecurity. You're expecting that they're going to be training it, they're going to upgrade it, they're going to do all those things for you. So you're getting a service for that fee. But the problem is with the closed source is it's not transparent, so you don't know what they're doing behind the scenes. So that's one problem we had with it, because when ChatGPT first came out, I tried to make my own. I called it CyberCop GPT. So I just did it with prompt engineering, and it was pretty clear that it just didn't do it. After a while, it just kind of did its own thing. It stopped doing what I asked it to do. So I thought, well, this isn't going to work. So I talked to some computer scientists, and they said, yeah, if you want this, told them what I want to do, you're going to have to build this thing on your own. You have to strip it down, take an AI off the shelf, which is the open source. I'll get to in a second. So take a open source model, train it the way you want to train it, and then you can monitor what happens. And then if you can tell people what you're doing, right? So you can be transparent about it. So that's the open source system. So now you can go to something organizations. There's one called Hugging Face, and you can download different AI models like ChatGPT, Llama, Falcon, DeepSeek, the Chinese one. So you can download the base models, and you can play around with them, and you can make it so it doesn't go out to the internet and train itself. You could say, like, here's the things I want you to learn on. You can upload that stuff either through a PDF or something called a JSON file, which is a text file that has some code in it. And then you could say, just focus on what I've trained you with and nothing else, right? So you know exactly what's going into it. So the benefit of the open source is you know exactly how this thing is going to work because you've trained it. The downside is then you have to worry about cybersecurity. You have to worry about privacy concerns. You have to do all those things on your end. So it's possible, but then you're going to have a funding source that allows you to do all that, and then you have to host it somewhere. So what we've done so far is in our chatbot is we've trained it. We used an open source model. We've tested against various types of AIs. So we've got it up and running. And then now the next phase is to test it with humans to see do people even like talking to this thing, right? Because one of the benefits of the closed source is they work hard to make it something you want to talk to, right? So it's not just a Google search. It's got some what they call uniqueness. So when you talk to it, if you ask it a question, it's going to give you a different answer in slightly different ways because it's mimicking that it's intelligent, right? But one of the downside of that is sometimes it can go haywire, like we saw with the last iteration of ChatGPT, where it became a sycophant, where it told you everything you wanted to know, or it complimented you all the time without giving you any negative or critical feedback. And so sometimes we want it to have critical feedback, otherwise it's not very useful to us.
So this would, again, just be an advanced version of something we'd have with our bank, or if we're going to a customer service of a major company. Right. In this case, focused on cybercrime, being able to provide that insight for you, giving step by step. So what were the metrics you'd be able to, what metrics are you using to analyze how effective it is?
Right. So the one we just, so we're writing a paper on it where we've put a bunch of different chatbots and we asked the question, like we pretended to be victims. We had a bunch of raters go into it and say, tell me about, this romance scam, and then see how the different chatbots responded to it. And there's lots of different criteria. So one was how efficient was it? So did it give you, 20 pages of text response, or was it a nice, concise summary? Were they in bullet points? Was it emotive? Did it try to talk to you, or was it just fact-based, right? So we had all these different criteria. So all the raters kind of went through and scored it, and then we added them up and averaged them. And we found that our chatbot did pretty well against even ChatGPT. ChatGPT did better in terms of how people interacted with it. They thought it was easier to talk to, but it didn't give the information wasn't as robust as it was when using ours, because we trained it. We knew what it was going to say.
Well, that's pretty interesting. And again, is there a human in that process then? So is it just a chatbot primarily, and then telling you, hey, go to the police if something kind of goes beyond what it can handle? Or how do you foresee that coming about?
Yeah, well, I mean, the chatbot will do most of the work, but the transparency side of it is we would monitor it. So we would look at, probably a random set of chat logs just to make sure that it's doing what we think it's supposed to be doing. Because we don't want it to hallucinate and then tell them, on second thought, why don't you invest in this cryptocurrency? It seems like a really good idea to me. So we don't want that. So that's part of the what we're going to use with humans is to double check. At some point, though, when it gets to the point of reporting out, it's going to say, you need to talk to somebody. So with enough money, with enough funding, we could actually have a center where it could simply, if it looks bad enough, it could refer to someone right there. And that's you would have to have a lot of resources to do that.
Sounds like something a government would have to do. It'd almost be like,
absolutely.
Who's the primary law enforcement for cybercrime in general? Does the FBI have a center, and then you have the local law enforcement? Or how's that broken down?
Right. Well, it's pretty fragmented. So one of the things I study is policing and cybercrime. So again, it comes to a matter of jurisdiction. So the feds are only going to get involved if it's a very serious case that involves a lot of people. It looks like a federal problem, in other words.
Okay. Yeah.
So they do have the Internet Crime Complaint Center. They'll take complaints from anybody, right? So a lot of police departments will say, look, you've been the victim of investment fraud. We don't have the resources to help you. Call the IC3 or you go to the website and file a complaint. And again, if there's enough complaints, then they might contact the person and say, hey, we've got an open case for this particular thing. If it's something more local, if it's a romance scam where there's actually been contact, let's say it started online, but then it goes face to face and it's in a local jurisdiction, the local police can get involved and take it from there. But so FBI, gets involved. The Secret Service has to do with credit card fraud, so they may get involved. Federal Trade Commission looks into some aspects of cybercrime. And then there's states attorneys general usually do fraud. So there's a lot of different places to go to. That's part of the problem is it's pretty fragmented. So one thing we want to do is with the chatbot will figure out, okay, well, this is the type of crime that seems to be investigated by this agency. So send them there.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. And how would the agencies be tied into the chatbot? Would they obviously be made aware of it, but they would have to maybe put in some of their own code or maybe some of their own directive, or would it be primarily led through like a team?
It would be led through a team. I mean, it just sort of depends on how it ends up. But again, the idea would be if it was, it's probably some central location. Let's say we create this chatbot, we host it at USF, but we hang it on Florida's Attorney General's website and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE. So people know where to go. So that's the first place they're going to go, it's important because they're not going to think of us necessarily, but they will think of law enforcement. So we would work with them to make sure that whatever they're working, so if they have any information, we put that in the chatbot as well. So if this was a Florida-based chatbot, for example, and FDLE is seen as Florida Department of Law Enforcement also has a cybercrime unit. If they're seeing certain types of crime, then they may want to tell us about it so we can train the chatbot about that, and then it can inform the customer. So it's definitely a back and forth.
Right, a lot of feedback. The trends change, the technology changes.
Right.
So what would be the timeline of this thing becoming operational? Is this something in the near future that could happen, or would it take a lot more longer?
Well, the technology. I mean, we have the technology, and we have a running version of the chatbot. We've put it up on GitHub, which is the open source repository for code for all types of things. And we're still training it. Now we're going through the human testing phase. That'll take probably about a year. So we don't really need much more in terms of technology, but we probably need then is a buy-in from law enforcement or some agency to help us promote this thing. So one thing I do is I go out and I talk to different groups. And one thing I hear a lot from law enforcement is, boy, this is really something we need. It's really a tool that's important. However, we're skeptical of AI, right? So, right. We've got to make sure that this thing works and we can demonstrate that it works. And then I think we'll get a lot more buy-in to it.
Right, because you're solving an AI issue with an AI program. So how can you have to be able to trust it. So how can you trust it? Is it just repetition and then building that in, the human evaluation once in a while?
Yeah, absolutely. So we evaluate it, just like any program, we want, evidence-based programs that we can say we've evaluated it. It seems to be working. We're looking for any unintended consequences. So again, one thing we're going to have to look for is, my suspicion is if this thing were up and running and it was out there on the web, it's going to attract malicious hackers. Right?
Right.
So we have to have, built-in cybersecurity. We have to monitor that as well. So the thing to really sell it is just, I think transparency and making sure that people trust the fact that we're constantly monitoring it, making sure that it's doing what we think it's doing. So one of the things about AI, I think that's kind of fascinating is there is a deep distrust of it, but it's so useful that people can't help but use it. And then one thing that's important for the chatbot is people like talking to the chatbots, especially in the case of victimization, because the chatbot is not going to judge you, right? It's a machine. So people will tell it all kinds of things about their personal life, and the thing will respond to you. So one thing we're curious about, we're not sure about this, so this will go in the human testing phase, is let's say somebody's been the victim of the cybercrime. Do they prefer it to be just the facts? Here's what happened. We think this is a romance scam. Here's what you should do. Or do they want some type of emotive response, which is, Jerry, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault that you lost, $5,000. This is a scam. These people are really, out to get you. Right. So to really reassure them that they're a victim, not because they're greedy or they're stupid, but because, someone was out to get them, right? Someone had them in their target sites. I don't know. I don't know if people want that or not. So that's one thing we'll test. So when you do general technology launch of something, you do what's called A/B testing. So you have two versions of it, and then you see what people respond to the best, and then you pick that model, and then you split it out again and keep going until you get the one that actually works. So that's the thing we'll do is we'll keep testing to make sure it works.
It's interesting that you guys are thinking about the kind of customer satisfaction of the program. Is that about just getting them to return to hopefully trust the system, or what's the additional step of the response and them liking it? I mean, because if it's a resource and I have a scam, I'd want to go back either way, right?
Yeah, right. And tell people about it, right? So I use this thing. It was absolutely helpful. I recommend that people do it. So one novel thing, and this is my one of my co-investigators, Lonnie Hagan at USF. So we've partnered with and started the Human AI Robotics Consortium, or HARC, and there's USF has a robotics lab. So we're going to take our AI chatbot and put it into what's called a social robot. So one looks about the size of a toaster, and has a very emotive face, and it will talk to a person instead of typing it, right? So that you get this back and forth. And the social robots will also have sensors that they'll read the person so they can see if they're being agitated or angry or upset, and then respond in that way. So it adds a little bit more feedback. But I think one thing that sold me on it was people kept asking me, well, do you really think someone who's retired and 85 is going to spend 25, 30 minutes typing on a keyboard to talk to this thing? And so because the robots are novel, and it's using all the things we've talked about, all the AI, so we have trust in that. So we're going to test this at libraries and senior centers just to see if people, so people may think, I don't want to talk to this thing. That's too creepy, but we don't know, right? So we have to see.
Well, that definitely sounds awfully futuristic.
It is. Right.
It seems like reminds me of like Total Recall or something.
Yeah,
like
that's
that,
right. Yeah.
Well, with that, the trust factor, can this chatbot, could you see it being used beyond just maybe cybercrime in the sense of being able to check, let's say I have I got a social media post, I'm not sure if it's AI or if it's real. Could it get to that level where it's able to distinguish, help someone identify a real website compared to a fake one, or a real photo compared to a fake one?
With the right training, it could. And that's one of the really benefits of the large language models and just the machine learning process is you feed it information, and then it tests it out, and then it learns from what it does. So the common thing is when you do the test when you're on the internet, it says pick the bicycles or the cars, right? So what you're doing when you're doing that, you're showing that you're a human, but you're also training the AI to figure out what's a stop sign and what's a bicycle. So when we have driving cars, it'll know what's what. So the AI says, well, I think this is this picture is a bicycle. What does a human say, right? And then it learns from that. So the same type of thing would happen where, we know these are the type of flags for a deep fake or a fake website. Look at it and see if you can find those same flags. And it can do it much faster. And it could do look at all kinds of things simultaneously. So it's better at that than humans. But again, you want to train humans to train it so it knows what it's doing.
And right, and so AI can be a solution for the problems caused by AI.
That's right,
or cyber is the solution there as well. And then any other national security aspects of this, of the rise of cybercrime, the use of these chatbots, anything else that we could apply to national security issues? And when we talk about infrastructure attacks, particularly, to kind of schools, hospitals, these other areas that use a lot of cyber, you don't think about it, but could easily be attacked by a malicious actor.
Right, and that's the soft targets have really become a problem, especially hospitals and schools, because the potential for harm is so great, especially hospitals. So I know lots of hospitals are worried about it. So one thing they're trying to do is build an awareness for from support staff, so their IT people, nurses, doctors, orderlies, anyone that plugs into the system. So the world of cybersecurity has been working on this for a long time to integrate both technical fixes but also human fixes as well, right? I think the way to go is just making sure that people are aware. One thing that organizations can do is then ferret out their access to critical systems, very judiciously. So not everybody has access to the system. You just go in stages, and you kind of have to prove your awareness to a level where you get the next, access to the next level and so on. So there's ways around that to make it more foolproof, but there's never going to be zero risk, because again, the hacker mindset is there's got to be a way in. I'm going to find it, right? No matter how secure you think you are, someone's going to figure out a way to get inside the system.
And that's why you have to constantly be evolving. It's just, you can't be stagnant. You're not secure.
Right.
You have to continually keep pace with that. So, to wrap up, if you were sitting down with the decision maker, whether the state of Florida level or maybe national level, you have your chatbot that you've noted and we've discussed. What would you discuss with that decision maker on how do we attack, cybercrime, reduce it, or, help inform the population?
Well, I'd probably start with, describing the problem, but if it's a policymaker, they're going to know about it already. And then say, we need a response that is scalable and that can adapt, right? So again, I think that's one of the benefits of the chatbot is it does both those things very well. Again, it's not foolproof, it's not a panacea, but it is better than anything we have right now. Because most places, it's like if you call the police and you've been the victim of a cybercrime, they're just going to say, well, here's the top three things we can tell you to do. Call the IC3. I'm sorry, that's about all we can do to help you. The chatbot isn't going to get your money back. It's not going to go after the criminal. It's not going to do any of those things. But at least it will increase awareness. And really what we want to do is increase what we call people cyber hygiene. So cyber hygiene is the things you can do to protect yourself. And everybody has a very, you can measure it, right? We do surveys all the time and asking people about what the things they do to protect themselves. And it's kind of, somewhat normally distributed. Some people don't do anything. Some people do a lot. Everyone else is kind of in the middle. So anything you do to kind of increase that level of cyber hygiene is very important because again, that'll lower the risk level, but not get rid of it, but it'll make it whatever organization you're in less prone to be attacked.
Right, because it's not going to get your money back, but it might be able to protect you from giving more money away.
Exactly. Yeah. And one thing we know about this is true victim of any type of white collar crime or fraud is anyone who's been a victim of the crime has a great increase of being victimized again. Right. So a lot of times because they were the victim of the crime the first time because they were desperate. With the case of senior citizens, they become the victims of cybercrime repeatedly because one, they're almost always lonely. They just want to talk to somebody and offenders are happy to talk to them. But also they have cognitive impairment and then they'll have someone kind of looking over their shoulder to protect them. Right? So we have to kind of think about the victimology of it as well to make them a little bit more aware about the risks.
Well, hopefully we can see this chatbot up and operational pretty soon. We appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks.
And that's going to wrap up another GNSI's video series. Today we were joined by Professor George Burruss, the current chair of the Department of Criminology here at the University of South Florida. And we held an intriguing discussion on the complexities of cybercrime and its impacts on society, as well as on national security. I'm Dr. Tad Schnaufer with the Global and National Security Institute. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you join us for our next video series.